It's your one-stop shop for great wrestling. It's the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. Ray Russell brings a host of great shows right to your device. There's the Wrestling Memory Grenade, Regional Wrestling, the Wrestling Stoop with Bob Roop, the Amazing Puro Academy Show, Retro Wrestling Review with Gene Jackson, Dave Dynasty's long-running hit, Wrestling Nostalgia, Monday Warfare, Raw vs. Nitro, the hilarious Other Ship podcast, and a whole lot more. Great shows and great guests, but where do you find all this stuff? Really simple. Try logging on to WrestleCopia.com. As I like to say, it's your one-stop shop for great wrestling memories.
Bet you ain't heard this sound in a long time, right? Welcome back to the Outdated Wrestling Hour. And in this edition, we're going to go way back and look at old school wrestling with a real expert. It's the one and only Tony Richards. He's the host of the hit podcast, Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel. Right now, I'm looking at an 8mm film of my old favorite wrestling. I'm looking at Victor Rivera taking on one of the Mongols. And then I'm going to look at Mark Lewin taking on a big rough guy named Moose Monroe. Those were the days. You got days like those too? You can't forget them. They just won't let you go after all these years. But then you're just like us. No jokes from me. It's good old school wrestling on the Outdated Wrestling Hour. My tie's caught. My tie's caught.
This is the Outdated Wrestling Hour. My name is Bob Smith. You might remember me from my years with Pro Wrestling Illustrated. And our co-host, as always, is Joe Puccio. And right now, let's just tell them what's going on here. We are trying to eke out our introductions here in the midst of Joe's construction project that's going on in his home. As you folks probably know in podcast land, it's not always two people in the same place talking to each other. Most podcasts are done by remote. Joe's at his place of residence, and I'm in my little home office here. Here's the problem. He's got some construction going on. It's Larry the Builder. How you doing, Larry?
I'm doing okay, other than the noise. A bit of an obstacle in doing my regular job as well. Here, I do a lot of Zooms. I do a lot of Zoom meetings and things like that throughout the day. So that's kind of tough to have to explain to everyone what's going on. And then, of course, there's this, which I look forward to a lot more than my work Zooms, doing this each week.
Right.
Yeah, we'll try our best to get this in the minimal noise.
Don't want to talk about the competition, but I'm picturing if Brian Last was in this same position. You ever hear the Cornet podcast? And if he hears anything outside, he has a cow. Can you imagine if he heard all this banging?
Yeah,
I think his head would pop off like a rock'em sock'em robot. You know, he would just not be able to handle it. I invest in all this equipment and all these studios to try to make it the most pristine sound that I can. And I hear that from listeners and fellow guests. They go, your podcast sounds great. I go, thank you very much. But this one's going to be a challenge. So, folks, bear with us for all the rat-a-tat-tat and bing bang boom. You know, it's like we're going to get through this. We have a lot to talk about. Our guest on this episode is the one and only Tony Richards, who you know from his own hit podcast. And he's got news about, well, you probably know this already, but he's about to win a major journalism award for his career work as a historian. So he'll talk about all that when he jumps in the studio in just a few minutes. Lately, we've been talking about the demise of the Peacock WWE library, which used to be the WWE Network library, whatever that website was that they had so far back, I can't remember at this point. But we were always able to look at everything from the Joe Puccio era to more recent things. And we're all saying to ourselves, "Where's all this content going?" Now, I'm gonna shock you. You all know how cynical I am and how down I am on things sometimes. I got news for you folks. The WWE Vault is great. It's not fair, it's not poor, it's not good. It's great. Are you surprised to hear me say this?
I am surprised because I knew of it. I didn't know the extent of it. I'm not 100% sure on exactly how much content is on there, what's available, if it's obscure stuff, if it's more common stuff. So, yeah, I'm a little surprised.
Well, I sat down and I just wrote down everything I saw earlier today, looking at and checking out some highlights from it and finding, and by the way, it's all free of charge on YouTube, right? Regular YouTube, not a pay service.
Yep.
This is all free if you can get YouTube. And like I say, I suggested everybody trying to find a way to have YouTube on your TV because it's just like watching television. The sound and audio quality is just as good. And so is the picture. You got to have, if you don't have a Roku box or a stick, I don't know what era you're living in, because you know what? You're missing out on a lot of good stuff in this age of streaming. Even if you don't stream TV like I do through Hulu, right? I stream my regular TV
Right.
through Hulu. There is many, many other services that are free of charge that are mint, like Pluto and Tubi, and you're missing out on gobs of stuff, you old timers. Invest in a stick or a little player like the Roku player or even Google Mix one, I think. I mean, it's time. If you don't have one, you're missing out an amazing amount of free content.
Especially, you just mentioned things like Tubi and Pluto. What's really nice hidden gems there are there's actual channels devoted to specific television shows or specific genres. So, you want to watch, you're in the mood for watching, I don't know, Happy Days. There's probably a Happy Days channel where you can just watch nothing but that. You want to watch something even going further back, I Love Lucy. There's probably an I Love Lucy channel. You can just kind of stream all the different I Love Lucy episodes. So you're right about that. And I think a lot of people are unaware of that.
I do
Uh,
too.
yeah, they don't realize that they have that, and it's fairly easy. You just have some type of streaming device. It's fairly easy to kind of pull that up.
Here's the other amazing thing about it. This is crazy. If you don't feel like doing even that, if you have a tablet or a phone, you get them on those too. You just download the app and watch these things. It's
Mhm.
really easy to do, and the amount of content is enormous. People are raving about Tubi's wrestling content. There's a lot of old wrestling on Tubi, a lot of old wrestling. And I've seen other people write about it on Facebook, and I went and checked out the wares, and I went, "Holy smokes, they're right." So it's a treasure trove, and the price is definitely right, no
Yeah,
question about it. So, hey, you wanna hear what I discovered as I farted around with this stuff?
sure.
So I type in WWE Vault on my Roku box, in YouTube, and I put it on. The first thing I see just pops onto the screen is this '80s match, pops right up. The Barbarian versus Coco Beware. And I went, and it's from just one of the old syndicated shows, and I believe it was Canadian Ring. Yeah, I remember the announcer in the Canadian '80s stuff. Is oh, this is interesting. So then there's a button that said play mix. Like there's a thing that says mix,
Mhm.
play mix. So I clicked that and offers live watch parties, which usually I don't like watch parties. People chime in and they write things. Oh, look at this, look at that. But I didn't see that part. I wouldn't be caught dead doing something like that. So what pops up when I hit it though? A house show match with no announcers, static view of the ring from about the 8th row of ringside. That's the view you have between Roman Reigns and John Cena. Like no announcer, house show match that nobody's ever seen. I'm like, yeah, I like this, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I really like this. I mean, I would watch that. You hear the crowd, but it reminds you of those old tapes from Madison Square Garden when back in when McMahon was doing the play-by-play. So I start scrolling down on this service. Here's something called Superstar Best ofs. A bunch of matches. So they went from 90 minutes to 2 hours and 3 hours on each wrestler.
Wow.
And you're gonna say to yourself, "Well, it's Hogan, it's Savage." Mm-mm. Listen to this. Complete presentations devoted to Too Cold Scorpio, Haku, Mike Awesome, Tajiri, Rob Van Dam, Perry Saturn, the Hardy Boys, Kurt Hennig, Sid Vicious, Bam Bam Bigelow, Umaga, Vader, Rick Rude, and the list goes on. Does that sound interesting or what?
Wow. Now these are So these are each wrestler. I'm getting this.
Each wrestler,
Clearly
it just a whole array of
a
matches,
bunch
one
of
after another.
matches.
Yeah.
Wow.
Is that interesting?
Yeah, that's pretty cool, actually. Like that Cena Reigns match you were just talking about, a house show or something to the effect. So it's
Yeah.
not even. So this was
No.
something that wasn't available
At
otherwise
all.
anywhere.
At all,
Okay.
at all. I mean, it's like they pointed a static camera at a
Yeah.
ring, and there was no announcers at all, and you watched the Cena Reigns match.
Hmm.
Right? Real interesting. And then they have this other thing, Full Event was on there from 1991 from London, Ontario again. It featured the Ultimate Warrior, Sergeant Slaughter, Jake Roberts, The Undertaker. That was just on the placard of it. And that
Right.
was a regular 3-hour event, house show, not a pay-per-view, a house show. Where's this stuff coming from?
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. That's what I was thinking.
Where's it coming from? Was it shown maybe for the local market and they just they found it and they're going to release it? The beauty part is they curated it, gave these things all titles and a fresh coat of paint. They're all in individual chunky sections. Although a lot of it's a mishmash, the
Mhm.
fact that they've gone to this amount of post production is very impressive to me. Just for the vault, the free stuff. This isn't for A&E or something like that. It's for their own free WWE
Right.
vault. Then they had old editions of the show you grew up watching, WWE Superstars, right?
Yep.
Full editions of that show, full home video releases available. Just press a button and watch them from back in the VHS days. They had an old indie match pre WWE days between CM Punk and Daniel Bryan, like when Punk had the blonde hair and all that stuff.
Not WWE.
Not WWF.
So this is
No,
like Ring of Honor.
who knows what it is? It's just
Okay.
it's pre when they joined the organization. It even said
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
on there. Pre WWE match between the two of them. Interesting, huh? They have ECW content mixed in there. All right. 2 hours of battle royals. Not Royal Rumbles, battle royals.
The OG. Yeah.
Yeah, from across the decades. Is this sounding good to you? Because it sounds good to me. They had best of the 90s compilations. A full area of classic Royal Rumble matches, the entire match of the Royal Rumble. You just hit it and you would see the whole Royal Rumble from years gone by, one after another. Free of charge. A rare footage section, a section of never before seen stuff. How about a match from England with Gunther versus Cesaro?
Whoa.
Yeah, whoa, exactly. How about footage from Florida from the famous 1973 match between Superstar Graham and Harley Race, the belt unification bout that was so famous in that decade? They've got it there.
Wow.
How about the world-class Christmas Star Wars from 1982? The whole card. Not bad. You're shaking your head and
Yeah.
smiling. I like this.
I remember that show well.
That was Kerry versus Flair on that
Yep.
one.
Yeah.
How about a full NWA Omni card from Atlanta in 1983? Right? How about a dark match? Imagine this. A dark match. This is what it's called, dark match. Dusty Rhodes versus Mr. Perfect Kurt Hennig. You can't even imagine that, right? That's all it is, that one match. Then there's a reel of old LJN toy commercials. Remember they had the wrestling dolls when they were new?
Of course.
Watch them all in one show.
That's right up my alley. I've told you about my love of LJNs. So I got to watch that.
Yeah, you certainly do have to watch that. And keep I kept scrolling down. There's a full section devoted to WWE, NXT, tapes in Espanol, right? A whole section called WWE Music. There's something called Sheamus's Celtic Warrior Workouts.
That I am familiar with. Yeah, I think they
never
do
heard
those.
of it. So
Yeah,
if
they
you
do
want
those every once in a while.
if you want to watch the podcast, they have all their podcasts. So much stuff. How about a reel with many episodes of Hulk Hogan's rock and wrestling cartoons?
Hey, they got the cartoon on there?
They got the cartoons on there, yeah. See, look at you. You get more excited all the time.
That'll bring back some good memories. Yeah, I used to watch that
I kept
all the time.
scrolling, man. I'm not nearly done. I kept scrolling. A massive WCW section. Massive. Just type it in. Full pay-per-views, full Clash of Champions cards, full episodes of the 605 show. Remember 605 with Tony Schiavone and Jim Ross or David Crockett? They're on there. And World Championship Wrestling shows. I guess that's the syndicated one. And I'll put it this way, and much more. How about it?
So how's the search function? Did you do a lot of that? I mean, like if you just type in a random wrestler.
No. I just kept scrolling down. I didn't even have to search. I kept scrolling down. If you type in WWE Vault and click it, you will come to their lead page. And you can scroll down. And it took me 45 minutes to scroll down the whole thing as I looked at the stuff that I just recanted to you. You know, it was like more and more and more and more. I didn't expect it to be the baskets of stuff that I found. And again, it seems to all be post expansion. But you know what? Fine. Post expansion is a long time ago. I
Well,
know a lot of our listeners like you grew up on 1984 to 2000 wrestling.
but not all of it sounds post-expansion. You mentioned several shows. You mentioned some stuff from the late '70s, some of the early '80s
A
stuff. So, I
couple of
mean,
things too, but it is rare there. I have
yeah.
to admit it is rare. There's no Joe McHugh era.
Okay.
If there is, I could not find it. And you know, that's my favorite era because I'm 106 years old.
Mhm.
But it's a situation where '70s were a long time ago, and the '80s are what brought a lot of people to the dance. And the
Right.
fact that the fact they're not just throwing this stuff out there willy nilly, they're post producing it, giving it titles and in a section where it all belongs. So as you scroll down, you'll see how organized it is, the vast variety of things they have. They're doing a hell of a job, man. I'm you know how I feel about WWE these days? This kinda makes up for all the well, it doesn't make up for the ticket prices, I'll tell you that, but it makes up for the fact that people are starting to feel that their content was inaccessible or that they've moved around too often. I say they threw a nice new coat of paint on old stuff, and I'm impressed.
Yeah, I think of all the things you mentioned, I really like the dark matches and things like that. The stuff
Yeah,
that I most likely have never seen before. You know, just seeing a random dark match from let's say a house show from 1984. I mean, that sounds appealing to me
and
because that's stuff that I never saw.
you know what's killer about that? It says dark match in the
Yeah.
description.
Yeah, yeah.
That term is used in the highlight, sizzle line, dark match, Coco Beware versus the Barbarian from blah, 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 1986. So you know you've never seen it before or
Uh-huh.
whatever it is. You know, I'm making up whatever that was. But the stuff is a lot of the content is never before seen material.
No, for sure. That definitely is appealing, and I won't lie, I'm also into watching some of those old home video releases like you mentioned, like, you're basically saying, like, the Coliseum video, those home videos that
They
they
had
put out,
s
some of that stuff is on
they
there?
had several of them as well as more recent ones that are
Yeah,
it says home video collection, and then you click on it, and there they were.
yeah.
So, yeah, and you know they're just getting started with this. They're just getting started. They have their tape library is legendary,
Mhm.
and I hope they just keep going and going and going because you know what? The price is right, and a lot of people, younger people, probably never saw a lot of this stuff
Oh,
before.
sure. Do you remember the initial home videos, the initial Coliseum video videos that they put out, the Best of the WWF Volume series?
I do, sure.
And, it literally went from volume 1, and it just kept on going and going, and I just have these vivid memories of going to the local video store when I was a kid, and every couple of weeks going there, and the new one would come out, and renting it, bringing it home, and it would be a couple of hours usually of just a mix of house show matches, mix of maybe TV matches, things you normally wouldn't see. There were skits in between, things like that, and even the possibility of stuff like that that's on there. I would love to see that stuff because I still have, believe it or not, some of those old Coliseum videos, and I'm talking VHS.
Right.
Don't really have a place to play it right now, but I still actually have them. When my local video store went out of business when I was a kid, they were selling the whole store, just, tapes, whatever you wanted to buy. A couple weekends, I went in with a friend of mine and I bought as much as I could, as much as the money I had. I just bought all the volumes. I bought the old WrestleManias, things like that. So again, you're not really most likely going to be able to watch it on VHS unless you have a means of doing that right now with the VCR. But just the fact that I have it is kind of cool. So I would love to see that stuff.
Absolutely. But, I still in my collection when they went to DVDs, I have WrestleMania 3, I know this. They did a really good Kurt Hennig collection at one point, and I bought that mainly to get my hands on the hour-long match between him and Bockwinkel from the AWA, which is an absolutely fantastic match. I remember bought the Ric Flair collection that they put out.
Right.
I also bought the history of the Intercontinental Championship for reasons I do not understand. I know that's in my collection, but I did buy that, and I know I have that one. And there's probably even one more mixed in there that,
Yeah.
I read that it has content I can't find. The
Mhm.
matches that I really, really wanted to see again. That's usually why I'll buy a DVD collection because it's like I can't get it anywhere else.
Mhm. I have a good friend that he is a DVD freak. He still constantly is buying DVDs, and I'm talking not so much wrestling, but just movies in general.
Right.
And I asked him, a few times, I was like, "But why are you spending so much money on these DVDs? I mean, can't you just stream it?" And he said, I like the fact I have this library that I can watch any of these movies whenever I want. It's not streaming
Right.
anywhere. It's
Right.
not on Netflix, nowhere. So he said, this, it might seem trivial to you, but he said, this is a movie that I really like, and there's no other option for me. So for me, I know that I could put my DVD into my DVD player and watch it. And it kind of opened my eyes a little bit because I said, I never thought of it that way. I think we just always assume that there's a place to watch everything, but there isn't.
There isn't. Recently, in the last couple of years, I read an article about Art Carney's 1974 Oscar-winning performance. He won Oscar, Actor of
Yeah.
the Year for a movie called Harry and Tana, which is kind of a dramedy, right? Nowhere. It's nowhere. It's not on cable. You can't stream it. You can't find it. Nobody's showing it. I've never seen anybody show it. It's curiosity from Paul Mazursky from way back when. People don't look at 70s movies. I had to buy a DVD of it. And I got it for like $5 on the Warner Brothers label, right?
Yep.
But there it is. There's certain other things that you can't find other than DVDs, obscure action movies that I've liked and stuff like that. I find them on DVDs. However, there's the other side of the coin where you spend a lot of money. I collected all 5 seasons of The Odd Couple season by season, and
Mhm.
now it's all available to stream on
Mhm.
video. I bought the Honeymooners Classic 39. You can find those everywhere too.
Yeah.
It's a situation where I bought Ernie Kovac's collection, that's streaming. I bought Monty Python, that's streaming. I have these big box sets here, even the Three Stooges. I have that beautiful big black box set of everything they've ever made. Now it's all on Tubi, all of it. Do I put the DVDs on? No, I just flip Tubi on because it's the same thing.
Yeah, that's a good point too. It's like if you have it on DVD, but it's also streaming, what do you do? Do you
You're gonna
actually go
stream.
you're gonna stream it because it's easier. It's easier to just stream it rather than go and get it out of the case and switch it, put it in the DVD. I get it. But anyway, yeah, I completely get it. It kind of makes me understand a little bit more about the people that still want to collect physical media.
I for some reason am a fan of an obscure action director named Andy Sedaris, who used to work for ABC and Wide World of Sports and stuff like that. And he went on to create what they called the Triple B movies, Bombs, Bullets, and Babes.
Yeah.
And I really liked these action movies. They were corny, they were hokey, they had humor to them. The cast all looked like supermodels, and I just liked this guy's work. So I saw one of his movies in 1979 at a drive-in called Seven. It starred Big Bill Smith, later known as William Smith. And it's just an action movie. I just loved this movie. It's
Mhm.
still one of my favorite movies. It has no right to be, but I love this movie. And sure enough, Kino Lorber, they put it on a DVD. I rushed to buy it.
Yeah, yeah.
I finally can see this again after I've seen it years ago. What happens? I find a streaming service that has it on there too.
Yeah,
And I'm like, Jesus, I thought I was never going to ever be able to see this movie. And now I can just flip my TV on anytime I want and watch it for
right,
free. But you know
right.
what? I'm not complaining. Do you remember you used to have to rely on your memory if you saw something you liked and there was no way to see it again? You remember
Mhm.
this? I'm old enough.
No, I know, yeah.
You got to look at the bright side. If I saw something at a drive-in in 1975 and I loved it, you never saw it again in any way, unless it was shown on TV all cut up somewhere. That was it.
Mhm, mhm.
Now, at least we have the option to go out and find myriad ways to see something from 1966. It's
Right.
incredible. So I'm looking at the bright side with all this. We are living in a golden age of too much entertainment.
Yeah.
We used to have 3 channels. Now we have too much entertainment. We do. We have too much sports. We have too much entertainment.
I
And
know.
yeah, I watched the movie on my phone. I could go for I was in a bowling tournament in Las Vegas a few years ago, right? All I brought was my phone, and I could watch the Mets from New York on my streaming service through my phone while I was there.
Yeah.
I mean, come on, what times we're living in? Are we grateful for any of this?
I watched this show on AMC called Dark Winds, and it's like the 4th season just came out, and I didn't get a chance to watch it. The season premiere was on. I DVR'd it, but, I was busy doing things, whatever, so it was still on the DVR. What did I do? I streamed it. I streamed it on the AMC, app on my laptop while I was working. this morning. So, I mean, is that recommended? No, probably not while I'm working. But at the same time, it's like, we're in that culture now where we have it at our fingertips. We can just watch it like that. And I watched it. It was great. And I'm done with it now. And now when I get off work, I don't have to watch it and go sit down and watch it, and sit down and waste time that way. But what
Yeah.
did I do? I wasted my employer's time. But that's another story. But anyway, yeah, I completely agree.
But here we go, back to wrestling. It's like, well, you flip around TV, there's nothing for me. I can go on YouTube and watch old Bruiser Bob Sweetan matches, or I can watch Randy Rose and Dennis Condrey matches from the Midnight Express, or I can, delve into the old IWCCW on my, the Saboldi group. Anytime I can
Right.
find old wrestling now. So I'm very thankful for it. I do hope that maybe the WWE releases a lot of older things for curiosities, or maybe dip back as far as they can. Maybe they have black and white stuff we don't know about. Who knows from the '60s? All I know is that I'm grateful for any of the old stuff I can find. I really am.
Yeah, for sure. It would even cool if they separated it somehow, like they had their own. I know this is wishful thinking, but if they had like a separate YouTube channel just for the pre-expansion stuff, or just for the '70s era stuff, or even the '60s era stuff, like, kind of like, because I know that that would be a very, very specific audience, and I'd be curious on how the viewership would be for that. I don't know if there's even a way to check that, but even if they did something like that.
I can only rely on my old friend Bill Apter, who knows people in the WWE pretty intimately, and he was told, and this is not a direct quote or an exact quote, but he was told, of all this stuff they released, that stuff was watched the least.
From that
But
era.
here's the problem with that. It just goes to show you, with all these wonderful wrestling historians like we got Tony Richards on, are people that are younger paying any attention to these folks that are really putting their noses to the grindstone and getting all this history laid out for them. I'd have to say yes in a way, because if it wasn't the case, all these wrestling books wouldn't about old history wouldn't be selling as well as they do.
Yeah.
Right? So it's weird. Or is this older people buying the books and young people aren't? Who knows? If there's any young listeners out there, avail yourselves of the history of wrestling if you can do it. The more you know about it, and the more you get to feel for what each individual decade in wrestling was like, going back to the '60s or even the '50s, that breadth of knowledge will make what you watch now more fun, I guarantee you. That's all I have to say. Fun. Old stuff can be fun. It's generationxwire.com. It's the entertainment website. You just told me of a couple new things approaching. Why don't you tell all of them?
Stephanie Powers, the actress for the television program Heart to Heart in the '80s, feature on her, not only her career as an actress, but about her time working for the William Holden World Wildlife Life Foundation. She does a lot with activism now, and we'll be talking a lot about that with her. I have something coming up with Felissa Rose from Sleepaway Camp, which should be really interesting. And also the author Josh Levine, who just recently wrote a book on Larry David, all about his upbringing, about Curb Your Enthusiasm, about Seinfeld, which was a very interesting book. Finished it, interviewed him, so that feature will be coming out imminently. So lots of things on the horizon.
Yet another femme fatale for you.
Who's that?
You,
Oh,
Stephanie
I thought you said you
Powers.
have one for me.
No, I don't have one for you. I'm just saying you're interviewing Morgan Fairchild and
Yes,
Stephanie Powers and Lydia Cornell, and it's the best of the '70s. Joe Puccio, thank you for being here once again.
thank you,
Good luck again with your house renovation or whatever is going on. What's the name of your pooch? He's holding a dog. What's the name of the doggy?
Lucy.
Hello, Lucy. Hello, sweetheart. It's the biggest softie when it comes to dogs. I really am. And there's nothing better. Have you seen our friend Wrecking Ball Legursky on Facebook with his little dog?
No,
There's nothing better than a 350-pound guy with a dog the size of a coffee cup. I am telling you, it's the greatest thing on the planet. I
I got
love
to
that.
look for that.
Big, brawny guys with their itsy-bitsy dogs. It just kills me. I think it's awesome. I don't know why. I'm delighted by that.
I have to check that out. No, I did not see that. But yeah, my dog is about six
Go
pounds.
find
So
our friend Wrecking Ball. Just go down his
I
stream and
will.
you'll see plenty of pictures of him and his favorite pooch. It's the best. And Wrecking Ball, this has got to be his year. It's gotta be Wrecking Ball's year this year. I think you saw how over he is. You saw it
Yes,
with your own eyes. I think it's time for him to move up a little bit, and one of these organizations, maybe AEW or somebody, find a reason to use this guy. You will not regret it. I'm telling you.
for
Do you
sure.
agree?
Yeah, I do. I really enjoyed him, especially on the night we saw him live at the NWA show. Really, really good. And yeah, I was actually surprised, admittedly, at how over he was. I didn't expect him to be over that much, but he was.
Listen, he works here, there, and everywhere. That's how you build yourself. Like Matt Cardona just came back to WWE, but you know what? He worked his tail off in the Indies,
Yeah.
and he was voted PWI Independent Wrestler of the Year at least one time. They have an awards for that now in the year-end issue. So anyway, as we think of our friend Wrecking Ball with a dog that weighs about 6 ounces, we got Tony Richards here, and you're really gonna have fun hearing about his life story and about what's going on with his career right now. Count to about 9.5. We will be right back. Welcome back. You know, there's a fellow here who is our guest tonight who I guess it was a little over a year ago. He sent me a couple messages on Facebook and we conversed back and forth. And I've been so busy and so crazy between the podcast and my little health issue that you can't always follow up. And I've probably been guilty of not following up well enough with him. But in the meantime, this wrestling expert and historian has developed a tremendous podcast called the Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel, which continues to grow by leaps and bounds every single week. He's being honored by one of the Hall of Fames this year, and it's a lot going on with Tony Richards. Tony, welcome to the show.
Thank you, Bob. I'm a big fan of your show, and I'm just very grateful and honored that you asked me to come on.
Well, no sweat. I mean, I'm very impressed with the, I always mispronounce it, Tregostez Hall of Fame. I'm going to call it that just to shorten it. But I'm very impressed that they selected you. They picked you out of a lineup to be the James C. Melby Award. I go back in the wrestling magazines decades, just like you do. And Jim Melby was like such a legend in publishing when it comes to wrestling. That's quite a feat. I got to congratulate you on that.
Nobody's more surprised about it than I am. I was told live on a recording by Layfield and Briscoe that I was going to get the award. And John Layfield, he always puts me over big on their show. Like, he always introduces me. He started out introducing me as their favorite historian. And then it worked up to the greatest historian. And then I'm feeling a little embarrassed by him putting me over so much. And then on this show, we just happened to have Ron Fuller there. It was the capstone of a series I did for them about the Welch family. Layfield comes on and he says, Jerry Briscoe, the Chickasaw Nation Hall of Famer, Ron Fuller, the Pro Wrestling Hall of Famer, and another Hall of Famer, Tony Richards. And I'm thinking, I got to stop this. Like, I got to correct him. Like, I'm not, there's 4 guys on this podcast. There's 3 Hall of Famers. I'm not one of them. And before I could get the words out, he says, you're going to be honored this year at the Tregostez Hall of Fame, and you've won the Jim Melby Award. And I was just, if you ever watch that show on video on YouTube, you can see me wiping away a little bit over here in my eye because I just started shedding a little tear because I was just so overwhelmed with gratitude that I would be selected for something like that.
It must be your body of work, I'd imagine, right? And here's the deal with wrestling historians. Now, I've had people call me one. No, I'm not. I know a lot, but I'm no historian. The historians are the people who are in there getting their fingernails dirty and digging out the facts and figures and keeping tabulations on championships and the comings and goings of wrestlers, just all the little stuff, all the minutia. I'm lazy. I'd never do that.
Right.
I rely on people like you to go and research what you've done to find out answers to questions. So there is a big difference. But my question about it is this.
Sure.
There's no doggone money in it. Why are you doing it?
Right? For the love of the game.
Yeah.
For the love of it. I mean, I'll be 63 years old here in a month or so. And for 54 of those years, 52 of those years, I can't do the math in my head, I've been a wrestling fan. And so I started being a wrestling fan in 1972 when I was 9 years old. And it's just been in my blood ever since. As a matter of fact, if you would have walked into my bedroom when I was a 9-year-old kid growing up in this little bitty town in Western Kentucky, you would have found 4 stacks. You would have found a stack of baseball cards and probably Street and Smith annuals. You would have found a stack of records. You would have found a stack of comic books, and you would have found a stack of wrestling magazines.
We already had the exact same views, man.
And
no question.
And that's, those 4 things have driven my entire life history.
Yep. I was similar to you. I'm actually older than you, and I started in 1970 at the age of 12. With me, it was upstate New York, the old NWF, Pedro Martinez organization. That's how I got hooked on wrestling in the beginning. It is funny too. How did you? Here's a question I ask everybody: how did you discover it when you were a kid? Were you just flipping channels or something like that?
No, it was our first UHF television station, Channel 29, WDXR in Paducah, Kentucky, owned by a fellow named Weeks Smith. And he had put that station on probably a year or two before I discovered it, because they were running this campaign of going out to your local store and buying an antenna to be able to pick it up, because you had the long flat antenna for VHF. And then you had to get another smaller, like bow tie antenna to pick up the UHF. So my dad decided we were tired of the same three channels. Now it's the chance to have a fourth channel. And so he goes out and gets this antenna. So this story kind of plays into how I got in broadcasting too. So I found this WDXR television, and for Christmas that year, my parents bought me this small black and white television for my room. And so I'm on there. I find pro wrestling. Now, remember the four stacks in my floor, right? I mean, this is like all of those stacks of things in my floor coming to life. Like the comic books and the wrestling magazines and all that's now moving on the screen in front of me. And I'm just enthralled by it. In addition to that, this UHF station was running all of the old reruns of the fabulous stuff from the 60s. And I'm seeing it like it's the first time. Like I'm seeing the Batman show. And that's my comic book coming to life. Now, in later years, yeah, it looks a little hokey, but to me at that time, as a 9-year-old, this was serious stuff. And then not only that, then I saw an episode of this show called The Outer Limits. And there was the first episode, I know this now, I didn't know it at the time, the first episode where Cliff Robertson has this radio station. And his part-time disc jockey turns up the power and draws this alien into Earth. And I just thought that was so cool. I'm like, I like that. I want to be part of that radio deal. And then the next year, I think 1973 maybe, my parents took me to the drive-in and we saw Play Misty for Me. And the movie opens up with Clint Eastwood driving a little convertible car up the California coast with the sunglasses on and the wind blowing in his hair and the cool music playing. And he's driving into the radio station and he's taking calls from girls. And all. I'm like, that's what I want to do. Like, I want to do that. Right. But the wrestling just kind of always stayed with me. I became a fan. Of course, growing up in the Tennessee territory, we got the Jackie Fargos, the Jerry Lawlers, and at the time I became a fan, it was Gulas Welch, which the territory was humongous. I had neighbors that lived down the road here, right down the road from where I live now. He would take his two daughters to the matches in Evansville, Indiana every Wednesday night. And I would ride with them, and he would take his daughters to the matches every Thursday night in Paducah, and I would ride with them. And back then we had weekly shows. So every single week I got to see live wrestling and some of the greatest performers in the world.
That's great. Boy, but we had the same kid life, man. It's like everything you said is basically what I did too. It was the exact same thing. And I got hooked really, really hard on it. I mean, I never wanted to miss a show. And of course, where I lived, wrestling came on Sunday morning at 11 o'clock, same time as church. And you can imagine the arguments in the house. I want to stay home and watch wrestling. So was it Jesus or Jose Gonzalez? Which is it going to be? Sometimes Jesus won out, of course. But
of course, yeah, we had, of course, growing up in the South, that was a regimen. And then when I started as a radio announcer, that got me in a little bit of trouble because the only time I could work when I first started was on Sunday morning. So of course I was going to miss church, and my parents had a big discussion about whether or not that was to be allowed. But I had such a passion for it, and I had such a desire to be in the radio business that my mom finally came down on the side of, well, this is really what he wants to do with his life. We don't need to stand in his way. So that's kind of how it got started.
Yeah, eventually it pans out,
Yeah, sure.
Really something. But I insist, I worked with Pro Wrestling Illustrated all these years. I insist that if I didn't watch a lot of wrestling as a kid, I wouldn't have been half as good a wrestling writer as I was. The stuff enters your mind. You see an angle that's kind of repeated decades later and things like that. So it made it much, much easier to do a job like that.
And then the reason I'm doing this today is because I spent probably 20 years thinking, When I get to a point where and I'm lucky enough that it played out this way, when I go into sort of semi-retirement, I'm going to devote a lot of energy into wrestling history. That's kind of where I am today. Is I have kept 2 or 3 clients in my coaching practice that keeps me busy and keeps me involved and keeps me, get some money coming in, and the rest of the time I put it into this stuff. And I'm particularly proud of the Trago Stes Hall of Fame for 2 things. One, that I would be mentioned in the same company as Tim Hornbaker and Mike Mooneyham and Greg Oliver and Steven Johnson. I mean, to be in that group of people is just, I have to pinch myself to make sure I wasn't dreaming.
Mhm.
Because I mean, those have been guys that have been friends of mine for a long time, especially Tim Hornbaker. Tim welcomed me from the first day and has been a super supporter of mine. And then the second thing is, I think I'm kind of the first guy to win that award, which is the Jim Melby Award for journalism. I think I'm the first guy to win it that didn't win it based on a published book.
Right, yeah.
That I'm the first one to win it based on my Substack and my newsletters and my YouTube and all these different types of media that's available and Twitter and all these social media channels for publishing and keeping wrestling history alive on those platforms, but not necessarily published book work. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, you know what? You have to do that because, the way information is disseminated, these are the times for that. You probably would have been a wrestling magazine writer back in the day if you had
Yeah.
that opportunity, but now there's no such thing as a wrestling magazine, basically. So everything changes, and you've used the new age technology to get the word out about your stuff.
A lot of my intention and a lot of my desire is to educate younger fans about what wrestling was before. Wrestling today and wrestling when we grew up, that's 2 different businesses,
Hmm.
2 different business models, 2 different presentations. It's not comparable, really. It's apples and oranges. But I'm not going to be influential with the modern fan by tearing their wrestling down because that's their wrestling and they love it just as much as we loved wrestling in our time. During my time growing up, the ICW started their promotion in 1978. And they started it in Lexington, Kentucky. Angelo Poffo, I had seen him in Phil Golden's All Star Wrestling. I had seen Lanny. I'd seen Randy under a mask, but I didn't know it was Randy. He wrestled as the Spider. And then he wrestled a little bit under Jim Pride as a name. And then I saw Randy Savage and Dutch Mantel feud and Nick Goulas in Nashville. Saw that feud. So when they started their own promotion, they based it in Lexington, Kentucky. Nashville was always the hub of wrestling when I was a kid. That's where the office was, and Nashville was a huge town. So they started in Lexington, Kentucky. For the Kentucky wrestling fan, that became our promotion. I mean, even today, if you talk to somebody from Kentucky and you ask them what their favorite wrestling was, most of the time it'll be ICW and then Memphis or Tennessee, because that was something that belonged to us. And when I was growing up, we only had basketball and horse racing. There was no pro sports team around. It was either in Cincinnati. Nashville didn't have a pro sports team at the time. St. Louis was 3.5 hours away. In 1972, my 3 big sports heroes were Dan Issel, Cassius Clay, and Secretariat. And in 1973, they brought Secretariat to our little town for a parade, and you would have thought the president was coming. When ICW came in, that became our promotion. And I know a lot of people down it a lot of times because it wasn't the flashiest and their television production wasn't the best, but it was still ours. And I know what I feel like when people say bad things about it. And that's why I don't comment on the modern product very much, because I don't want that fan to think I'm, for lack of a better word, I'm taking a urination on their wrestling. And they're like, well, I ain't going to listen to that guy. He doesn't like what I like. I want them to take my education for what it is so they can see what wrestling was like in the 60s, 70s, and sometimes the 80s. A lot of the 80s have been talked to death by now, and I like to talk about things that happened before video.
Yeah, and your show actually proves that every week because it's like you do go way back. I mean, and you've had guys like a couple friends of mine, Howard Baum, Steve Gennarelli, on
Mhm.
to talk about different areas, different time frames, which adds a little lilt to the show as well.
Yeah, and I had wrestlers from then. Also, I have Jerry Oates on a regular
Mhm,
basis. I
mhm.
have Mike George on. I have Red Dog Larry Lane on. I have Bobby Simmons on, who was one of the premier NWA referees in Georgia and worked in the booking office for Jim Barnett. I mean, I have all those guys on, and they're not speculating. They were there.
Right.
So I love talking to them about the mindset and the stories and all of that. If I can get all that down recorded, then we'll have it. I just did a show with Scott Teal, a bonus podcast that's going to be coming out here soon about Frankie Kane. Two great books by Frankie Kane and Scott Teal that has information in there that will just be lost if we don't get it recorded in some way. And so I'm trying to get around to as many people as I can that are still around to document this stuff.
Well, you're doing a heck of a job because it's been quite a couple of years for you in both podcast land and just general media. So I congratulate you on that.
Well, thank you,
I,
buddy.
I, I probably am a little bit too verbose when it comes to. Well, I get offended at some things that today's wrestling does, and here's why. I have the utmost respect for those guys, from the Sheik to the lowest preliminary guy, who, when he got into the business, did his best to protect the business.
Sure.
When I see things have gone completely full circle to the point where there's a Netflix series about exposing the business now, it's probably selfishness on my part. I like the old days better. There's no question about it. I
Oh,
still watch
sure.
it. I still watch today's wrestling. And when I see the dangerous maneuvers some of these young wrestlers take, I worry about them limping at the age of 40 and hurting themselves in other ways. And I think my opinion on wrestlers is I think they're great athletes who you have to devote your whole life just to become even the lowest wrestler on a card if you're going to do it for any length of time. So I don't wanna see see them getting hurt. Maybe I'm too much of a pacifist, but I think they're taking unnecessary risks.
Yeah, I don't disagree with anything that you said. And Howard Baum and I have a lot of off-air conversations about it. And at the end of the day, we know our wrestling isn't coming back. And I've come to the conclusion that I'm not watching the wrestling that I watched when I grew up. I'm watching something different. And when I put it in a separate category, I'm not as offended about it because it's different rules, it's a different paradigm, it's a different way of thinking. Howard Baum was on somebody's podcast I was listening to one time, and he went on a rant that summed up everything I think and feel about it, that we're not supposed to know how the magic is made,
Mhm.
and that was true in our time, but you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube. I am not totally unconcerned about the wrestlers. I'm very concerned about them, and I don't understand why they would want to put themselves in that position or do those things, but they do, and I'm not going to change it. I do enjoy some of it from time to time.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. I mean, there's parts of it I do like. I
But
think
I'm the living example of your biases. Like I'm never going to prefer other music over the 70s.
no, you
I'm never
go.
I'm never gonna
Yeah.
I'm never gonna prefer other movies over the '70s. I'm
Well,
never I
here's
love
the
all of the
thing.
'70s stuff more
Here's
than
the
I love anything.
here's the thing. We're '70s kids, and your favorite music, TV shows, and movies from that era will remain that for the rest of your life. I don't think there's any question about that.
The '70s are just such a cool decade because almost all the rock bands in particular, I was thinking about this the other day. They were making music based on their influences from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. And all those bands, whether it was Led Zeppelin or ELO or Styx or Heart even, they would have these 6 to 7 to 8 minute masterpiece recordings where in the middle of it, they would just take off on some kind of influence from jazz or some kind of influence from even classical music. You listen to ELO and you listen to Roll Over Beethoven, and it's almost like, gee, I'm in the middle of a Bach concert here all of a sudden. And then all of a sudden I go back to Jeff Lynne's guitar and we're rocking and rolling again. And I just love that variety that
Mhm.
was in the music back then.
Everything was freeform. You could put an 11-minute track to end your album, you know?
Well, it
Even though you had
basically,
3-minute AM hits on side 1, but side 2 could be something else entirely.
the artists that made the music that drove the business, I mean, it basically created the format we used to call album oriented rock.
Yeah.
And that basically found a home on FM, because nobody listened you had to get a converter to listen to FM back in those days. And
Jeez,
all
yeah.
of that stuff drove all that. And I'm very thankful for that. I grew up in that time.
Me too. Seeing the first concerts, everything. You bring back all my good musical memories and stuff that influenced me when I became a musician of sorts for after a while. So you're always
I,
going to be romantic about your earlier days. There's no question about that.
I have nothing against the current lineup or the current presentation of the Eagles. I got no problem with it. But I saw the original group
Right.
and on the Hotel California tour, and nothing will ever top that. I don't care how many crazy video presentations they got flying around you in Las Vegas. I will always go back to those original guys and that original sound and that original presentation as being my favorite.
There's another thing that is exactly the same as wrestling. If you go to a concert even with older musicians now, the audio video presentation, big screens, scenes from the past. Every older artist now has shows behind them when they were younger and lights and flash, and it's not just a five guys standing on a stage anymore. It's a multimedia presentation, and that's what wrestling is too when you think about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I was telling somebody the other day, I was on a show and we were talking about it. And I'm like, if you would have gone to see a wrestling movie in the 70s, we already know what the wrestling show looked like, right? I mean, it was wrestling. You had probably 3 or 4 matches and some interviews, and that's what it was. And more wrestling than interviews because the guys are really good at interviews, and then it only took them a minute or two to get their point across. But if you would have gone to see like The Wrestler, how much wrestling was in that movie?
Oh, the 73 wrestler?
Mhm.
Not a whole lot, really.
Right. That's what we're watching today. We're not watching a wrestling show. We're watching a show about wrestling.
Mhm. True.
So there's a lot, and also the guys are wanting to go to Hollywood. They're wanting to be in movies. They're wanting to be on television shows. They're wanting to be in commercials. So they're happy that that part of their wrestling career is being showcased because the wrestling part of it is only going to get them where they already are.
True.
So they're happy about the way that trend is going because they want to take those interviews or those things. And also WWE is owned by biggest talent agency in the world. So they know that they have a sister company that can get them in a movie or in a television show or in a commercial or whatever. I just watch it that way. I'm like, okay, I'm not watching a wrestling show. I'm watching a show about wrestling. And it's mostly going to be talking and interviews and backstage segments and then a couple of matches.
That's basically it. I keep telling my co-host Joe Puccio, I want to turn on SmackDown, which is a 3-hour show now. I'm going to just time the matches. Like I'll get a stopwatch on my watch and I'll just hit it off and see how long that 3 hours literally consists of wrestling matches. I guarantee you it's about a third of it.
Of course. And I watch it on well, it's not tape, but whatever it is when your television records it now.
Yes, DVR.
And I won't watch it on Friday night. I'll watch it on Saturday morning. And I'll just sit there and hold my fast forward button until I get to a match I want to see. And I might see 1 or 2 matches and maybe an interview for the top program if CM Punk's on there or if Cody's on there. So I want to hear how they're putting over the feud, but most of it I'm zooming through.
I hate to say I'm guilty of that as well.
Well, I mean,
That
that's the technology we live in today. So, I
yeah.
mean, it's not that I'm committing a big sin by doing that. They're putting it out there for you to do that. I don't have to watch Raw on Monday night. Netflix will have it for me anytime I want to watch it. So
That is true. Yeah.
I mean, so it's not the same business. It's a different type of business.
Well, if you're my age, you know that watching television, if you wanted to change a channel, you just have to get up out of your chair and go flick a knob and then go back to your chair.
I was the remote control in our house. My dad would hey, Tony, get up out of the floor and turn the television. The other thing I would say about that too is I went through the trauma of watching my regional weekly wrestling promotion from the territory era. I watched them go national. And for me, that was like, I didn't want to go with that. Well, now it's the same thing, except it's not national, it's global. I'm not here to argue with any fan that has their opinion. I mean, people are upset WrestleMania is going to Saudi Arabia for a lot of different reasons and the other. And I understand all that. But you have to understand the business is going global. You can't expect the big couple events to still be in the United States if you're going to be a global business. I mean, you have this lovely local pizza shop that you absolutely love in your town. And then all of a sudden that becomes so popular, they decide to franchise it and put it in all towns. A lot of your local things that you liked about that piece of joint are going to go away because now they have to make it so everybody in the country likes it, not just the people in your town.
Let's go back in time a little bit to
Sure.
younger Tony.
Yeah.
If you could go to your television set right now and turn on one wrestling organization or time period or show that brings you the fondest memories, what may that be?
Based on what I thought back then or based on what I think now?
Right now, if you could watch one
Oh,
thing, what would
no
it be?
doubt about it. I'd be watching West Texas wrestling in Amarillo.
Wow.
And no doubt about it. Because I grew up in the Tennessee territory and got spoiled just like Jimmy did. Because we got to see that stuff every single week. And a lot of guys, when the videotape came around and people started seeing things that were going on in Memphis, they're like, wow. And we'd been watching that for 10 years. I wouldn't go away from that. I'm so happy that I grew up in that territory at that time. But I've done a tremendous amount of research on West Texas and the Funk family. I still got a Dory Funk Senior book coming out here someday. I'm so familiar with all the feuds and all of the wrestlers and all the stuff that went on from the 20s through the closing down in 1980. And there's only like 4 video clips that exist from the territory and no complete television shows. Man, if I could have watched that back then. I mean, I saw Terry Funk on the cover of Wrestling Magazine when he won the NWA title in the 76. And I was so upset because I knew he's probably not going to come at a time where I'm going to be able to see him. And it wasn't until 1981 he came to Memphis to a feud with Jerry Lawler that I saw him live. I was at that match and I had my driver's license. I was a senior in high school. So I went to every match Terry Funk was in for that year in the Tennessee territory. So if I could go back and watch West Texas wrestling, if I could go back and watch Dory Funk Sr. and Cyclone Negro and the King of the Texas death matches, I would. Absolutely.
You actually went to Memphis. Where were they promoting at that point? What was the venue?
Mid-South
It
Coliseum.
was still Mid-South way back then.
Oh, well, Mid-South Coliseum, they moved from Ellis Auditorium to Mid-South Coliseum in 1972. So the year I became a fan, they moved there. But Evansville was the closest market they went to every week. That was Wednesday night. Tuesday night was Nashville. Every now and then I'd be able to catch a ride or go to Nashville. And then once I got my driver's license, I went there for I mentioned before, the Dutch Mantel Randy Savage feud. Memphis was 3 hours away, so it wasn't really handy or convenient for me to be a regular Memphis attender. But a lot of times we got the same match that Memphis had the week after in Evansville. That's what I grew up on.
Even into the 90s, Jerry Jarrett was doing the Phantom title changes because the TV was 1 or 2 weeks behind. Even into that era, they would kind of switch titles back and forth without the other city knowing about it.
Oh gosh, well, he learned that from Nick and Roy, Nick Goulas and Roy Welch. I mean, they had the interns, or they would have they would send 3 different sets of those guys in the same suits to 3 different towns. And you thought you were seeing the interns, and you might, if you were in one town, you might be seeing the actual guys, but in other towns, they were just workers under the mask and the hood. And, fans were paying to see them and they didn't know any different. And Nick always had like 3 or 4 tag team titles all the time. And it was warranted because the Southern tag team titles were defended mostly in the Memphis end. And the Southeastern tag team titles were defended down in Chattanooga or down in Birmingham, Alabama. They had the Mid-America title, which defended down in that area. And they had the Southern title over in the other area. If they said they wanted in Columbia, Tennessee, we didn't know. It's like, oh, wow, the title changed hands in Columbia, Tennessee. Wow. And it might be the guy just left the territory.
You know what I liked about that area, too, of the country is that when they did tag teams, they took them real seriously. I think way more than they did on the East Coast in that era. East Coast, we were just talking about this on a previous show. I think some of the tag teams were kind of like an afterthought. There would really be only 3 teams in the whole territory. Whereas down south, teams would form out of need or some feud or something like that. And they could be main eventing.
You were a little bit of an inspiration for me about this because you put the original PWI 500 together.
Mhm.
And so this year, like a week before, now I had cut, all last year, I had gone through the entire year, every day by day, following 1975. It was 50 years ago last year. So I was very familiar with 1975. So around Christmas, I decided for New Year's Eve, because when I was growing up, I loved the music countdowns that you would hear at the end of the year about what the top 100 songs were, right? And I thought, I think I'm going to do a 2-part podcast for New Year's Eve and New Year's Day on the top 100 wrestlers of 1975 because I've watched it all year long, I put the list together, and hardly any of those top 100 wrestlers from 1975, there were no tag team guys in it because there was enough tag teams to make up a top 50 or top 100 list, all just based on tag team. Like for Jerry Briscoe, for example, he came in like at 25 or 26 because he was in a singles feud that year. Jack was the world champion for the entire year. But if I would have made that list in 1977, Jack and Jerry would have been at the top of the tag team list. Well, that's another thing I liked about the 70s. It's almost like you got to look at it year by year because so many different things were happening that in any given year, the top of that list could look different, if that makes sense.
No, it does make sense, yeah. Particularly for that era, just the way things went back then.
Yeah, I mean, we had, just for the year of 1975, out of those top, let's say 20 tag teams, we probably had 4 or 5 of them.
Mhm. Yeah, think about that, it's right. It's so much fun just to sit back and think back to the stuff that really brought us a lot of enjoyment when we were younger. I mean, to me, it's like a fountain of youth when I get to talk to somebody like you or a lot of our other guests who were around in the same era that I was. It's like the stuff, for some reason, I can't remember my birthday, but I can remember the 1975 matches I saw in an armory in Albany, New York.
Well,
It's the stuff that you really enjoy that gets into your soul that never kind of lets you be. You always remember it.
I have a 10-year-old niece, my brother's daughter. I don't have any children of my own. She will say, Uncle Tony, just tell me about, when you were a kid or whatever. What sorts of things did you do? I'm like, well, I'd watch television or I'd read one of my baseball magazines or I'd read a comic book, or if I wasn't doing that, I'd be listening to an album, and now she would be like, well, I do all of that stuff at the same time. I'm like, well, we
Mhm.
didn't do that back then. If we were going to listen to an album, we wanted to listen to it. We didn't have the television and this going and the computer. We didn't have computers. So I think the appreciation for that stuff was deeper because of the singular focus that we had when we were growing up at that time.
By the way, I just want to regress. Write a passage for me every spring. Street and Smith's baseball and Who's Who in baseball. Remember the little red digest size magazine that was just stats?
Oh, absolutely.
I used to love it. I had every one from 1970 to the last one they published a few years ago.
Every year I got the Street and Smiths baseball and football. I sat and just looked at those, and we are only going to get 1 or 2 games a week, on television. Following along with the roster and all that stuff was just a thrill for me as a kid.
I used to love the spring preview magazines with baseball.
Oh, yeah.
I'd buy other ones too, but mainly I remember looking for Street and Smiths once I got hooked on that one. And the
I
sporting news
remember.
book. And the sporting news books that came out every year too were great.
I remember in particular being so excited because there was a guy in Double-A baseball down in Little Rock, Arkansas, that everybody was writing articles about, named Keith Hernandez. And Keith Hernandez was going to come up at some point to the big league St. Louis Cardinal baseball team, and he was going to be a difference maker. You'd read that stuff and you'd wait, until you'd finally see him go to AAA. And in Tulsa at that time was the AAA team. And then it's like, oh man, when's he going to come up to the big leagues? I can't wait, until somebody like that does that. I still remember that stuff.
My first newspaper job was in my hometown, and somebody I knew in high school got signed by the Seattle Mariners, Mickey Brantley. And we were a small town. I mean, my graduating class in high school was like 100 kids. It was very, very small. Boy, Mickey's, and I got a call from somebody who was related to him. This isn't news yet, but Mickey just got called up to the Seattle Mariners. So I had a scoop. Nobody knew this. And I said, you can verify. He said, absolutely, I can. He's just been called up. So I called the Seattle front office and they go, "No, we can't really release it." But I called the other person back and said, "Trust me."
How exciting.
So I go and I do a stop. I go to where we printed the paper and I said, "Gotta put this on the front page." Because it's a small town and one of our people is going into the major leagues. And I got it out there. And of course, he had a son, Michael Brantley, who had a really great career, who just
Sure.
recently retired. But that feeling of, hey, I know him. Here's the guy I'm going to root for the rest of my life because I have a personal connection to him. There's no feeling like that when it comes to sports, I don't think.
No, not at all. Yeah, music comes close. When you were telling that story, I was remembering that in my senior year, I was one of the main writers for our high school newspaper. And the day John Lennon died, I wrote a piece about how deeply emotionally that affected me. That was just sort of an early outlet, for me to express my thoughts and feelings. And I enjoyed doing that.
Have you done a lot of professional writing in your time other than the books that you're doing now? Because I'm interested in how you got into book writing.
Well, I've written 3 other books about management that have been self-published and have sold decently. On my website for my consulting practice, there's, written 750, 800 articles for that. And I just started thinking that's why I write the daily history newsletter that I write now on Substack is I know you get better by repetition. If you want to be better at something, you got to do it more. If you want to be a better guitar player, you got to play more. If you want to be a better golfer, you got to play more golf. And the more reps you can get in, your skill set should increase based on that. So I thought, if I want to be a better writer, I need to write every day. So I created the Daily Chronicle on Substack to be the daily pro wrestling history newsletter. And I write it every single day. And I'm just getting reps in. And I think it's just a way to fortify my confidence that when I do release the book, it's going to be at least I've put in the time and the effort to get better as a writer. I'm not just throwing something out there. And it's probably just the way I think about myself.
Writing is like the Excel computer program. You think you know everything, but you're not even
Oh,
scratching the
no.
surface of what writing is. And it's a funny thing too, because I wrote in my high school and college newspapers and stuff like that. But once I became a professional writer and reporter at my first newspaper job, you are learning every step of the way. And I'm so blessed that I had some good editors and writers who coached me on don't do this, do that, do that. And you continue to learn at my age now, I'm learning new stuff. So it's like it never ends. It is a challenge sometimes. I'm in the process of writing a book too right now, and it is taking far longer, and it's maybe the hardest thing I've ever written. I could write about anything else about other than myself, and I'm finding it hard to think I'm interesting enough to write personal things into a book.
Yeah.
So it's always a challenge. And how have you found it in terms of the nuts and bolts? Not so much having a completed piece, but putting it together, making sure the grammar is correct, the style, the syntax, whatever, you need to do.
Well, that's part of that, Bob, is one of the reasons why that I don't call myself a pure historian. I always present myself as a historian and a storyteller. If anything, pro wrestling is a storytelling art. And so you have both ends of the spectrum. You have people that want to read something interesting, but then you have another set of people that want to just absolutely positively critique you to death on accuracy and
Mhm.
correctness.
Yeah, yeah.
My gosh, I almost every day I have at least 2 or 3 people that point out something in one of my social media posts that's inaccurate, or I've either hit a wrong keystroke or I have some neuropathy in my hands, so sometimes my fingers don't work exactly as well as they used to. So instead of 50 years ago on this day in pro wrestling history, I might put 60 years and it should be 50, and I'll get 4 people go, "It's not 50, it should be 60." I think there's a certain amount of liberty that can be taken when telling these stories based on if you have all this evidence over here, even though you don't have it absolutely that this happened, you can possibly describe it in a way based on these things over here that we do know. And I think there has to be some color and liberty to be placed within that in order to tell a good story. Like,
Yeah.
I can't talk to Dory Funk Sr., and almost nobody's around anymore that did talk to him or did know him. However, if I get to know him well enough and I read enough about him that is available, I think I can have some leeway to describe some things in his life that probably happened, but I don't have documentation that they have. In other words, if I tell a story about him traveling across the country with Dory Jr. and Terry in the back seat of the car and his wife in the and they stopped for a hot dog and he thought about these things, that helps people get to know Dory Funk Sr. Do I have a newspaper article or something saying he stopped for a hot dog on the side of the road? No. But you understand what I'm saying? Like,
Yeah.
I think there's room for that in order
Yeah.
to tell the story.
Well, that's why one of the phrases I type more than any other is the words "as I recall."
Yeah.
Because that absolves you for having to be minute rice perfect in every single little nugget that you're dredging up out of your brain, you know?
Yeah, or
It's how you
we can assume that,
Yeah, it's
you
how
know.
you remember it. I mean, and I think there's value in that too. Even
Yeah.
if it isn't the correct date and hour, it's
Right.
still something that needs to be remembered. And I think that, yeah, particularly in the internet, if you get the tiniest little nugget wrong, people are going to bombard you with, no, no, that wasn't Santana. It was this other guy. Oh my God, it'll drive you crazy.
Yeah, I was watching a shoot interview here a while back. Jim Cornette was interviewing Greg Gagne, and so Gagne's telling the story about Super Clash. And instead of calling it Super Clash, he called it Clash of the Champions. And I thought, man, that's probably driving a bunch of people crazy. You know,
Mhm.
they're probably yelling at their TV going, "It wasn't Clash of the Champions, it was Super Clash." And what does that have to do with the story he's telling? As long as I know the difference and as long as I know, and I just want to hear the story. I mean, I already know the difference. So who cares?
I agree. I absolutely agree. I mean, listen, everybody wants to get things as correct as they can.
Of course I do.
But in the context of the importance of what you're talking about means something too. If it's an anecdote about somebody you talked to 37 years ago and you say it was in Memphis and it was actually in Nashville, I don't think it's that important, personally.
Well, no, not really. I don't think so either. And it could have happened in both places the way wrestling was done back then. I
Mhm.
mean,
Yeah.
because the Tennessee territory was, a territory that did that a lot. They'd change the title in every town. So
Yes.
everybody didn't have newspaper access to other towns, so they'd change it in Birmingham and Chattanooga and Nashville and Memphis and all around the loop. Everybody thought they saw the title change, and they did it 4 times. So which one is the official one?
Did you ever have access to East Coast stuff where I grew up, WWWF? Did
I
you ever
didn't.
see do you look at the tapes now? How
Yeah.
familiar are you with it?
I saw it for the first time, I think around 1980. I was somewhere where they had access to the network that was carrying the house shows at the time. It was at the Spectrum or it was at Madison Square Garden. I can't remember exactly.
Mhm.
But honestly, after growing up in the South and growing up in Tennessee territory, the first time I saw it, I thought it was real slow.
Yeah, everybody says that, yeah.
Because, Roy Welch invented Southern wrestling, which is based on lighter weight guys that did more things at the time that would have seemed at the time to be high spots with real colorful heels and very action oriented, lots of brawling and lots of outside the ring and fans going nuts and all that. And then, I kind of saw the WWF stuff, which reading in a magazine, you don't have a context, right? And I'd
Right.
seen the magazines for years, but then when I saw it, I thought, but I slowly but surely adjusted to the style. I was telling Generelli the other day that probably in the last year or so, I probably have gained so much more appreciation for Bruno Sammartino than I ever had before. And based on his wrestling ability, not based on anything else. I mean, of course, I know he was a major draw and super, super popular and amazing couple of title reigns and all that. But to watch the different kinds of matches he had, if he had a George the Animal Steel match, or if he had a Spiros Arion match, or if he had a Waldo Von Erich match, he worked different with those guys. And I probably didn't have that appreciation before.
Yeah, I tell you what, the syndicated shows, what I call the Joe McHugh era of
Yeah.
people from other territories look at those tapes from the '70s and go, "What were you guys watching? Everything was a 10-minute match on television, and there was no action. Nobody fought outside the ring and this and that." I'm like, "Well, it worked for the McMahons for decades. They didn't change that
Oh,
format going all the way back to the late '50s, really."
no, not really.
And I remember this about WWF, and especially when I went to my local town to see it. They were like real rule stickler organization back in those days, even though everybody's breaking rules left and right. But the fact was, it was always the State Athletic Commission presents blah, 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 and the
Okay.
chairman of the State Athletic Commission is so and this and that, and they presented it almost as if it was boxing, but it was wrestling.
Sure.
That was the vibe of it to me, the ring, the
And we
arenas,
had
all
that
that
in
stuff.
Tennessee too. I mean, the
Mhm.
Tennessee Athletic Commission and the Kentucky Athletic Commission, they were very involved, in the wrestling business. And, for years, the Tennessee Athletic Commission banned the pile driver. So when a heel did the pile driver, when the referee was either knocked out or distracted, that was big heat because everybody knew that was against the rules. And Roy and Nick were really good at using the rules and using the commission to generate heat in the story. But what I was going to say there when you were talking about the difference on the East Coast I've talked to Steve Lee a lot about this, is it was two different business models
It was.
because you had on the East Coast, you had big towns and big arenas and once a month shows. In the South, we had weekly shows and 5,000 seat arenas. Here's where I get a little conflicted thinking about the list and the rank and this, that, and the other, because what's more impressive? The guy works 18 times a month and draws 24,000 people in every arena, or the guy that works 30 times a month and draws 6,000 every single week. They both add up to 24,000. You just got there in different ways.
So you're podcasting, you're writing, you got your fingers in a lot of different pies right now. And you're going into a Hall of Fame thanks to your work. So there is a pretty quick reward for your efforts. I think it really belies the quality of what you're putting out there. I mean, this stuff doesn't grow on trees. That Hall of Fame particularly, because they don't elect 20 people every year. It's just a couple of people.
No, and I think some of it too is beyond my writing. Again, being on the show with Briscoe and Bradshaw and being a good storyteller, I think has a lot to do with that. I know Jerry Briscoe in particular told me that somebody that was involved in it said, I could listen to that guy tell stories all day long. I think that's been part of the reason why as well. No matter what I'm doing, now I may not be the best at it, but I will endeavor and put the time in and the focus in and whatever to be the best at whatever I'm doing in the moment. When I was an on-air person, I worked very hard to be as good as I possibly could be. When I was in management, when I was in programming, when I was running companies, I worked hard to be the best CEO I could be. When I opened my coaching and consulting practice, I worked very, very hard at that. I mean, I got consumed by it. I just worked really hard. And I'm working really, really hard at this because if I'm going to do it, kind of like your podcast, you want to be the editor, you want to be the producer, you want to put out the product that can stand up against anybody. I feel the same way. That's the kind of person I want to be in the history and storytelling category.
Here's the deal. The most successful people in any form of entertainment or creative arts, do it for yourself. Do it for yourself. And if
Yeah.
you're enthusiastic about it and have the wherewithal to put out the highest quality you can, people will listen and people will watch or people will hear. But if you don't do it for yourself first, and try to like pander to a certain audience to try to figure out, some kind of a marketing strategy in that regard, you're going to fail.
Yeah.
Because if you don't have integrity to yourself, I don't think you're going to be a big success no matter what you do in these regards.
I totally agree with that. And I'm doing the show today that I couldn't find in the podcast world.
Yeah.
And the show that I would want to hear, so
Yes.
I am doing it for me because all the shows that I do, those are shows I'd like to listen to. And that's why I have a lot of guests where I want them to be the star of the show. I want to hear their stories. I want to interview them. I want to ask them questions that I would want to know the answers to. And I totally agree with you. I also think that when you have giftings in a certain area that aren't going to be expressed, I think that's a very frustrating place to live. And I think you feel your best as a human being when your gifts are being utilized and are on display, whatever those gifts are.
Absolutely. Because it's a gift for someone else.
Mhm.
It really is. Somebody takes the time to write me one sentence on Facebook saying, I really enjoyed the show this week. You know what that means? It means everything.
Oh, absolutely.
Be damned for the money or any other commerce reasons. The fact that you were able to use your talents to entertain someone and make them happy for 15 minutes did my job, man. That's the whole thing.
my most repeated reply is, "Thank you for your kind words."
Yes. Yeah.
And
And
man, I'm telling you, those don't come easy these days,
no,
you know? And
yeah.
so when someone gives another person, in this case, it would be me, or in your case, it'd be you. When someone gives somebody a kind word, that's a treasure because
It
we're
really
living in a time where a lot of people are not giving a lot of each other a lot of kind words. So,
no, it's true. We're both old school, man. I'm an old hippie, you know? Actually, no, I was actually too young to be part of the hippie era. I was like I graduated high school in '76, and I think hippies were kinda out of 73, 74. It was kinda it for the hippie era, really, when you think about it. But you know what? I still believed in, peace and love, everybody. And I say at the end of every show, just like Ringo does, because it's like, what else do you need? I mean, where have our priorities gone, right?
well, that's right. I mean, that's why, every show I sign off, if you want to be a better neighbor, if you want better neighbors, be a better neighbor. And let's support each other where we can. That's my sign off to every show that we have. And that's my personal philosophy. I'm going to lead with kindness.
So let's support you. Tell all of my listeners where you can be found, any projects you have, your Substack to your podcast,
Yeah.
everything else. Floor is yours. Hype away.
Well, the Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel is a community, and it's got different segments, just like any community. We have our Facebook group. That's kind of a different group there that support what we do. That's the Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel Facebook group. I have my Substack community. The people on Facebook, they love pictures. They love photos. They like to look at old photos. I post quite a bit of those old newspaper ads and things like that. The folks in Substack, they are readers. They want to read stuff. And so they're a little bit a different part of our community. You can find us at Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel at Substack. And I post a daily history newsletter called the Daily Chronicle. It comes out every morning at 5 a.m., comes to people's email boxes. You can disable the email feature if you want to. If you just want to read it on the website and you don't want to have your email fill up, you can do that. We have some people that do that. I also get people who become premium investors at $5 a month or $50 a year if you want to save $10, and they get special research and writing that I do for that support in my work. And my biggest community, almost 20,000, follow me on X. Tony Richards, the number 4. So Tony Richards 4 on X is where you can follow me. And I do a lot of work there as far as wrestling history is concerned.
Well, there you go. And of course, your podcast is available wherever podcasts are disseminated, plus YouTube, right?
Yeah, the podcast is available in audio form wherever you get your audio podcast. We're on all the major platforms. You can get the video version of it in 2 places. You can either get it on our YouTube channel, which is Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel, or we publish it on Substack, both in audio and video form.
There you go. And I'm going to let the cat out of the bag about something. You're coming back on the show, right? And
Yeah, I'm
because
working on that project right now.
yeah, me too. It's harder than it sounds,
It's
isn't
difficult.
it? And I'm going to let the cat out of the bag. Just first I mentioned is Steve Gennarelli, the king of creativity, I call him, because he's always got a concept. Says, Bob, let's do a show. Because, I may be facing surgery sometime in the next 8, 9 weeks or something like that, maybe. And I'm putting shows together that don't have a specific date or time just in case I'm laid up or I can't talk or something like that for a while. I don't want to miss a Friday. I'm going to have a show all year, come hell or
Sure.
high water, right?
Yeah.
But in any event, he comes up with this concept. He goes, Bob, let's do the 50 top wrestlers of the 1960s. I go, 60s? Okay. Because we've already done the 70s, we've done the 80s,
Yeah.
we've done tag teams, stuff like
Matter of
that.
fact, I just listened to those shows again because
Oh,
I
okay.
wanted to familiarize myself with the way you do
Format,
it. Yeah.
right. So he calls you or gets a hold of you. You're in, and now John McAdams is in too. So there's going to be
Good.
4 of us. First time ever, we're going to have a quartet of wrestling people on the show, taking a look at the top 50 wrestlers in our mind's eye of the 1960s. And Steve came up with the ratings point system and everything else. It's going to be a blast. And I am finding it harder to accumulate 50 from the 60s than I ever dreamed it would be, because you know what? There weren't as many wrestlers in that era.
Actually, there were more. I got 300 on my list.
You got 300. I'm having trouble, but I could find wrestlers who were on the list. I just don't know if they deserve to be in the top 50. I'm a little bit,
As a matter
more.
of fact, I sent Steve a note. I said, Hey, just to make sure I understand correctly, the other shows y'all did 100. You just doing 50 for the 60s? And he goes, yeah. He goes, why? And I said, because I got 300 here, and I'm going to have to narrow it down.
Mhm.
And the thing is, the territory era started forming in the 20s. The lines got really strongly drawn in the 50s. It lasted until the last territory closed down in 97, which was the Memphis territory. But most people are familiar with the territories in the video era, from 79 to 90. But man, in the 60s, there were so many that really the 1960s was really the primo time of the territories, because there were so many of them, so
Yeah.
many territories, and so many guys working in the business back then. Because when Barnett started doing local studio television in the 50s after the Dumont network was headed for its demise, well, then every territory started doing that. They started producing their own local television, which really fortified the territory lines and really started getting more guys into the business. Because during the Dumont network era, you maybe had 20 guys who were on the big stars on the Dumont. But in the local territory television, there were hundreds and hundreds of guys and girls in the business back then. That's where I've got like 40 territories, and I've got the top 5 or 6 guys in each territory. And then I'm trying to narrow it down from there. I mean, obviously you got your top 10 that is pretty going to be pretty similar among all 4 of us, I would imagine. But then there's going to be probably some different perspectives.
They usually are.
I'm
But you know
excited
what?
about it. I
But
can't believe I'm being invited.
well, here's the deal, once you take all 4 lists, and what I do is I get a hold of all your lists, right?
Yeah.
Then I use Steve's point rating system or ratings point system to rate them as if we're all one voice. And when you have those disparate opinions, once you glom them all together, it usually comes out as a pretty accurate reflection of what actually happened in that era.
And because there is no national territory
Right.
in the 60s, all things are kind of equal, because I bet you almost that no one's going to have Lynn Rossi on their list. And
Probably not.
Lynn
Mhm.
Rossi drew millions of dollars in the Tennessee territory in the 1960s. So did Jackie Fargo. But they drew it 5,000 and 6,000 people per town every single week.
That's right.
They didn't draw one time a month and 25,000. They drew 25,000, but they drew it over a month period of time. And again, how do you weigh that? I'm not
Right.
sure. Being from the South and being that from that part of the country, I would probably have to guard against my bias to not give those guys more points, where you guys may want to give the guys on the East Coast, more points because they were drawn into big towns.
You said it. I'm trying to figure out where Spaceman Frank Hickey is on my list. No, I'm kidding. I'm joking. I'm joking.
Spaceman
You're
Frank Hickey, he lived in one of those wigwams outside of Nashville and Memphis, and loved to give tours and had all of his wrestling costumes hanging up inside. And
I find that 100% believable.
yep, sure did. They had those
Yeah.
old Indian hotels, the motif, where all the rooms were like wigwams. Frank got one and set it up outside of town and lived in it, and would charge tourists coming by to see Spaceman Frank Hickey.
I wonder how well he did. That's another story for another time, I guess.
Yeah.
But we're looking forward to having you back, and that's going to be a
I'm
blast.
excited about it.
So I want my listeners to know, you guys, top 50 wrestlers of the 1960s, singles wrestlers, of course. Of course, there may be some tag team favorites mixed in amongst those singles. We will find out how it all shakes down.
You bet.
And if you want to find out more about Tony Richards, every week, Pro Wrestling Time Tunnel should be on your radar. And I thank you for your patience in getting on the show. I really appreciate you being here.
I'm happy just to be here, Bob. I thank you so much for having me on, and I enjoyed our conversation more than you know.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And we'll see you soon. And folks, the one and only Tony Richards.
Thank you, everybody.
Attention, Gen Xers. If you'd like to explore the era that appeals to you, look no further than GenerationXWire.com. The generation who grew up with the elite in entertainment, music, movies, TV, books, pro wrestling, and more, finally has a one-stop destination for all their Gen X needs. From Aerosmith to Batman to the Killer Bees to the Twilight Zone, there's something for everybody at GenerationXWire.com. You won't find a more eclectic mix of pop culture content than at the leading website that specializes in the greatest generation, GenerationXWire.com. Check it out today. That's it for another edition of the Outdated Wrestling Hour podcast. We hope you enjoyed yourselves. Write to us, outdatedwrestling@gmail.com. Our website, outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com, where you can find all of our episodes at the press of a button. We will never Patreon you for those. Also on the website, you will find a box that says Outdated Wrestling Hour Fan Club, where for a nominal fee, you can help perpetuate the ongoing adventures of this podcast and our sister show, the Outdated Entertainment Hour, which comes out about once a month. All of it on outdatedwrestlinghour.buzzsprout.com. We're available on every podcast app you can think of. Please join us again. Both the Outdated Wrestling Hour and the Outdated Entertainment Hour are shows provided by Bob Smith's Podcasts. The Outdated Wrestling Hour is part of the WrestleCopia Podcast Network. That's it for now. We hope you had a really good time tonight. And we're out every Friday with new editions of the Outdated Wrestling Hour podcast. So until next time, this is Bob Smith. You might remember me from my days with PWI. Thanks for being loyal fans. Thanks for listening every week. And we always say the same thing at the end of every show. In the words of Ringo Starr, peace and love, brothers and sisters. Peace and love.